Erev Shabbat Shalom Rabotai. We are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Sotah. We are up to Perek Chet Mishnah Zayin. Today's Mishnah should be Le'ilu Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbai Veliyahu ben Burcha Israel of Chana bat Miriam Sason ben Raya and Yoshua ben Shifra Menuchatam began Eden Amen and Avde ben Chaim Lechaim v'derefua shelemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa betoch Shah Chulei Israel. The Mishnah teaches that the exemptions apply only in certain types of war. The Mishnah refers to both types of exemptions, the men who go to the border and then return home, and those who do not leave their homes in the first place. It deals with three categories of war. A war fought to expand the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, such as the wars fought by David HaMelech in Aram Tzova and Aram Naharaim. B, a preventative war intended to weaken an enemy before it attacks. A preventative war is one fought against enemies of the Jews who have not attacked Eretz Yisrael in order to weaken them and prevent them from attacking in the future. And C, Yeshua's conquest of the nations that lived in Eretz Yisrael and the war against Amalek. These wars are mandated by the Torah in the book of Dvarim, chapter 20, verses 16 through 18, chapter 25, verses 17 through 19, and other places. Everyone agrees that category A is not an obligatory war, and that category C is obligatory. Tanaim disagree about the status of category B, a preventative war. B'medvarim amurim, in what type of war does the matter of exemptions apply? B'milchemet harishut, the exemptions apply in a non-obligatory war, which according to this Tana includes a war fought to expound the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael and a preventative war. This Tana classifies any war that is not specifically mandated by the Torah as non-obligatory. But in a war that is a mitzvah, for example, Yeshua's conquest of Eretz Yisrael and the war against Amalek, there are no exemptions. Rather, all go out to fight, even a bridegroom from his chamber and a bride from her chuppah. Although a husband is exempt from all war-related duties for 1 whole year after his nisuin, as we spoke about in Mishnah 4, that applies only in the case of a non-obligatory war. He is required to join a war that is a mitzvah immediately, even if he has to leave his bridal chamber where he spends time alone with his bride on the day of his marriage. Now, a bride is not required to fight on the battlefield, but she must aid in the war effort by supplying the soldiers with food and so on. So again, according to this Tana, the exemptions apply even in a preventative war. Furthermore, he classifies such a war as non-obligatory. The next Tana agrees that the exemptions apply in a preventative war, but he disagrees about its classification. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, in what type of war does the matter of exemptions apply? B'milchemet mitzvah. They apply in a war that is a mitzvah, which includes a preventative war, and they certainly apply in a war fought to expand the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, which everyone agrees is not obligatory at all. According to Rabbi Yehuda, preventative war is a mitzvah, and still the exemptions apply in its case. According to Rabbi Yehuda, preventative war is also a mitzvah, since its purpose is to protect the Jewish people from their enemies. Nevertheless, he agrees that the standard exemptions apply. So Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanna Kama agree that the Torah's exemptions apply even in a preventative war, and they disagree only about the classification of such a war. The Tana deems it non-obligatory, while Rabbi Yehuda deems it a mitzvah. The practical difference is whether those participating in the war are exempt from doing other mitzvot, according to the rule of Haosek b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. One who is doing a mitzvah is exempt from another mitzvah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, who classifies a preventative war as a mitzvah, the participants need not do any other mitzvot at that time. But according to the Tanna Kama, who does not call it a mitzvah, they remain obligated in other mitzvot. But in an obligatory war, for example, Yeshua's conquest of Eretz Yisrael and the war against Amalek, there are no exemptions. Rather, all go out to fight, even a bridegroom from his chamber and a bride from her chuppah. Now, there is no disagreement at all regarding Yeshua's conquest of Eretz Yisrael and the war against Amalek. Everyone holds that the standard exemptions do not apply, and that those participating in such a war are exempt from doing other mitzvot. Nevertheless, the Tanna Kama calls it a mitzvah, while Rabbi Yehuda calls it an obligation. The reason for the different wording is that since Rabbi Yehuda classifies a preventative war as a mitzvah, and yet the exemptions apply, he must use a stronger word for Yeshua's conquest of Eretz Yisrael and the war against Amalek, from which there are no exemptions. So for this reason, he calls it an obligation. To summarize, It comes out that the Tana Kama and Rabbi Yehuda completely agree regarding all exemptions. According to both Tanaim, the exemptions apply in A, a war to expand Eretz Yisrael, and B, a preventative war, and they do not apply in C, Yeshua's conquest of Eretz Yisrael and the war against Amalek. Their dispute concerns only the classification of a preventative war. The Tana Kama does not classify it as a mitzvah, and therefore those participating in it remain obligated in other mitzvot, whereas Rabbi Yehuda does classify it as a mitzvah, which means that its participants are exempt from other mitzvot. A fourth type of war is mentioned by the Yerushalmi here and the Rambam in Hilchot Melachim, chapter 5, Halacha 1, namely a war against an enemy that has already invaded Eretz Yisrael. This is different from a preventative war, which is against an enemy that has not yet invaded. A war against an invading enemy is certainly obligatory. There are no exemptions at all, and those participating in it are not required to do other mitzvot. And again, regarding our Mishnah, the Rav does tell us that the Chad does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Chad follows the opinion of the Tana Kama, that a preventative war is not considered a mitzvah, and therefore those participating in it remain obligated in other mitzvot. And that is the end of Perek Chet Mishnah Zayin. We move on to Perek Tet Mishnah Aleph. The Torah commands that if the body of a murder victim is found in Eretz Yisrael and it is not known who killed him, measurements must be made to see which town is nearest the body. It is assumed that the murderer came from the nearest town. However, this assumption is valid only where the towns in the area have the same number of residents. If one town has more residents than the others do, the murderer is assumed to have come from there, and it's elders of that town it is the elders of that town who must perform the ritual of the Eglah Rufa. Now, the elders of the town bring a calf that has not done any work to a hard rocky valley and kill it there by chopping its neck from the back. They then wash their hands over the dead calf and declare in reference to the slain person, "Our hands have not spilled his blood," etc. A verse from Dvarim, chapter 21, verse 7. The Kohanim pray, "Atone for your people Israel," verses in, again, Sefer Dvarim, chapter 21, verses 8 and 9. And the entire passage is quoted in the introduction of chapter 9 in the article elucidated for explanation. Now, we learned in chapter 7, Mishnah 2, that the elders' declaration and Kohanim's prayer must be made in Hebrew and not any other language. The Mishnah cites the source for this law. Eglah Rufa b'Lashon HaKodesh, the ritual of the Eglah Rufa, the decapitated calf, must be carried out in the holy language, Shenemar, because it is stated in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 21, verses 1 and 9, Ki matzeh halal ba'adama, if a corpse will be found on the land, they shall speak up and say, "Our hands do not spill this blood," etc. Although the Mishnah quotes only verse 1, it uses that verse as a reference to the entire passage, including verse 9, from which this teaching is made. The same expression, "they shall speak up and say," appears in the passage about the blessings and curses given at Mount Gerizim and Mount Eval, in the book of Dvarim, chapter 27, verse 14. The ceremony of the blessings and curses is described in chapter 7, Mishnah 5. The use of the same words in both passages create a link, Gzera Shava, between them, which teaches that just as the blessings and curses were given in Hebrew, like it speaks about in chapter 7, Mishnah 3, so must the statements of the Eglah Rufa ritual be made in Hebrew, as the Gemara explains in Masechet Sotah, page 44b. The Mishnah discusses who makes the measurements from the corpse to the nearby towns. V'yatz'u zikenecha v'shoftech, it is written there in Dvarim, chapter 21, verse 2, "Your elders and your judges shall go out, and they shall measure to the towns that are around the corpse." This tells us that 3 judges of the great court in Jerusalem would go out from Jerusalem to make these measurements. The word zikanecha, your elders, teaches that there must be 2 judges. The minimum implied by a plural word is 2, while v'shoftech and your judges teaches that there must be 2 of the greatest judges in the country, namely those who sat in the great Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. It is unacceptable, however, for a court to have an even number of judges, because if they disagree, there might not be a majority to decide the matter. A 3rd judge is therefore added to ensure that there will be a majority in the event of a dispute. Now, a different opinion is cited in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Chamisha, 5 judges are needed, Shenemar zikanecha shnayim, because it is stated your elders, which implies 2 judges, v'shovtecha shnayim, and your judges, which implies another 2 judges. Now, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that Shoftecha and your judges teaches that the judges of the great Sanhedrin are required. He derives from the vav of this word, and your judges, that there must be 2. Then Bedin Shakur, and since a court cannot be composed of an even number of judges, Mosifin Alen or Echad, we add 1 more judge to those 4, making a total of 5. And that is on Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have Erev Shabbat Shalom. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.